The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep shade of navy. Daniel Carter pulled his coat tighter around his body as he trudged down the lonely road. His car had broken down nearly a mile back, and with no cell service in this desolate countryside, he had no choice but to walk to find help. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the distant hoot of an owl. As Daniel walked, his gaze fell upon an old Victorian house, its silhouette ominous against the backdrop of the full moon. He hesitated. The house looked abandoned, but its structure was still intact. Maybe there was a landline inside. As he stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaked under his weight. A musty scent wafted through the cracks in the door. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. The door wasn't locked, so he slowly pushed it open, his heart pounding in his chest. The interior was just as eerie as the outside. Dust hung in the air, catching the light from the moon filtering through cracked windows. Furniture, covered in white sheets, looked like ghostly figures frozen in time. A cold draft swept through the room, making the chandelier above sway slightly. "Hello?" Daniel called out, his voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. The floorboards groaned beneath him as he ventured further inside. He spotted an old rotary phone on a small wooden table. With a sense of relief, he lifted the receiver, only to be met with dead silence. No dial tone. Just then, a sudden thud echoed from upstairs. Daniel froze. His rational mind told him it was probably the wind, but a chill crept up his spine nonetheless. Against his better judgment, he climbed the stairs, each step announcing his presence. At the top of the landing, he saw a long hallway lined with closed doors. One of them, at the far end, was slightly ajar. A soft glow emanated from within. His pulse quickened. "Someone is here." "Hello?" he called again, stepping forward. The door creaked open wider, revealing a dimly lit room. A candle burned on a bedside table, its flame flickering wildly. The walls were adorned with faded, peeling wallpaper, and a heavy wooden wardrobe stood against the far wall. But it was the bed that caught his attention. A woman lay there, her face pale, her eyes open but unseeing. Her lips moved ever so slightly, whispering something too faint to hear. Daniel took a hesitant step closer. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She suddenly bolted upright, her mouth stretching unnaturally wide. A guttural, raspy voice escaped her lips, not hers, but something else. The candlelight flickered violently before snuffing out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Daniel stumbled backward, his breath coming in rapid gasps. A cold hand clamped onto his wrist. He jerked away, scrambling for the door, but something pulled him back. The darkness around him felt alive, shifting, whispering. Shadows twisted along the walls, moving with malicious intent. He tried to scream, but his voice barely left his throat. The woman, or whatever she had become, was now standing beside him, her head tilted unnaturally, her milky eyes locked onto his. "You should not have come," she whispered, her breath ice-cold against his skin. Daniel wrenched himself free and bolted down the hallway. The house groaned as though it were alive, the walls closing in, the air thick with something oppressive. He stumbled down the stairs, nearly falling as the house shifted around him. The front door slammed shut just as he reached it. He pounded against it, desperate, his heart hammering. A chorus of whispers filled the room, overlapping voices speaking in hushed, indecipherable tones. He turned, pressing his back against the door. The woman stood at the top of the stairs, but now her form was distorted, her limbs elongated, her face stretched in a horrifying grin. She descended slowly, her bare feet barely touching the steps. Daniel grabbed the nearest piece of furniture and hurled it in her direction. The object, an old chair, shattered against the staircase, but she didn't flinch. She only grinned wider. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The whispers ceased. The air stilled. And the house fell into a dead silence once more. Daniel turned, yanking at the door handle with all his strength. It finally gave way, and he stumbled outside, collapsing onto the damp grass. The night air was thick with the scent of rain. He scrambled to his feet and ran, not stopping until his lungs burned, not daring to look back. His car was still where he had left it, but now the hood was open. A man in a mechanic's uniform stood beside it, wiping his hands with an oil-stained rag. "Looks like you had some trouble," the man said with a grin. Daniel gasped for breath. "The house, that house." The mechanic's smile faltered. He turned to look where Daniel was pointing. There was nothing there. Just an empty field. Daniel's blood ran cold. He knew what he had seen. He had been inside that house. He could still feel the icy grip on his wrist. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The mechanic chuckled uneasily, shaking his head. "Come on, I'll give you a ride." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. As he climbed into the truck, he glanced at his wrist. A faint, bruise-like imprint of fingers wrapped around his skin. The house may have vanished, but it had left its mark.